I'm Becky from the Vermont Bookshop, and my job is to introduce Kirk, who is a senior writer at the Tuck School of Business at Dartmouth. Are you still?
Still, yeah.
Good,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
He is an avid cyclist and skier, and a journalist who writes about the intersection of agriculture, business. I did not memorize politics.
That's okay. Yeah, I just.
But you are a writer first and foremost, and you were curious about the farming industry, so you went off on a search for information.
Yeah.
We're here to hear what you learned and what you have to
you.
say about it. So thank you for being here.
Thanks for inviting me. No, it's an honor. I'm really pleased to be here, and thanks for coming. We could all be home watching Netflix or something, but we're out here engaging with real humans, right? Yeah, I know. So thank you for coming. Since we have just like a handful of us, I mean, can we just kind of keep it casual and maybe? I met you, Dave, and Denny. I haven't met you yet. Siri? Okay, nice to meet you. Do we want to go around and kind of say why you're interested in the dairy industry? Maybe that'll kind of help me. If you are, I mean, I'm assuming you are since you came, to this. But
sure. I saw the advertisement upstairs, and I'm not from Vermont. I've been here about 3 years, and so for me, it's just another way to kind of learn more about the state. Obviously, I know about dairy in Vermont from a 30,000-foot perspective, but some of the history that I've read is kind of shares part of the story, but I'd be more curious to know what's currently happening besides sort of just the history of it.
Okay.
And you said you work for the town of Middlebury. What's your role?
I'm the town's assistant manager.
Okay, so you do have an
So
understanding of the demographics.
So I have a good foundation, but
Okay.
especially the industry as a whole and maybe where it's going.
Yeah. Cool.
From your opinion, from all your work.
Yeah, definitely.
I'll ditto a lot of that. I've been here 4 years, and I'm trying to figure out what's happening. Obviously, dairy central. I'm surprised that there's not more big political discussion about it. I think people are afraid of it. I don't know, but I'm here to find out. Bernie, for example, never heard Bernie talking about dairy, which I think is odd. But I do think it's really important. I live in New Haven. I'm surrounded by dairy farmers, and I converse with them, so hoping this will help me know more when I talk to them.
Yeah, great.
Well, I wasn't born in Vermont, but I did grow up here, went to high school here, and went to school for animal science with a focus on dairy initially, because that's what I was used to around here. And then in college, I switched my major, came out, and my partner was actually invested in dairy. He had a herd, was looking to buy a farm, realized it wasn't feasible. So we were almost dairy farmers, backed out of it. We own what used to be an organic dairy farm in Bridport, not far from here. So again, like surrounded by dairy. A lot of my colleagues and peers that I speak to are dairy farmers. We raise sheep, but surrounded by dairy. So that's who our colleagues are.
Okay.
So yeah, it really close to my heart, but not directly involved.
yeah, cool. Well, this area is, I think, one of the bastions of dairy farming in Vermont. I mean, I think there's not many pockets of the state that have as many farms as Addison County. I mean, up in the northwest. When I drove here, I drove on Route 12 from Woodstock through Barnard to Bethel, and along Route 12 there used to be a dozen dairy farms, and now there's only one. You can as you drive around Vermont, you kind of see the history of dairy farming in Vermont and what's not there anymore. And what's still there, if you still find dairy farms, there's like a reason behind every farm and why it's still there, like a way that they've made it work. So anyway, if it's okay with you, I thought I would just read a couple of passages from the book, and it'll help explain how I got into this, and we'll also kind of bring up to speed where things are today as the last time that I looked into things, which was like this summer. So I'll read just from my introduction. I wrote this book because of an irksome incongruity. In the spring of 2009, I was driving my daughter 8 miles every morning to daycare, and on the way I would listen to Morning Edition and the local news on Vermont Public Radio. Almost every day, it seemed, there was one story or another on the so-called dairy crisis and its impact on farms and communities. As an average consumer of milk, cheese, yogurt, and butter, I listened with a somewhat aloof curiosity about the drop in farmers' revenues, the increases in grain prices, the volatility of the global milk market, and the accelerating decline in the number of dairy farms around the country. And then I arrived at my destination, a private daycare in a house on a small dairy farm. And everything I heard on the radio simultaneously angered me and made no sense at all. Inside that house lived Russell and Mary, their 20-something son Ryan, and a big, lazy yellow Labrador retriever named Caleb. Outside on the pastures lived 70 black and white cows. On the farm, the men do the milking and the cropping, and Mary cares for the newborn calves. On the side, Russell and Ryan boil sap into maple syrup and plow driveways, while Mary cares for neighborhood kids. They have served on the town select board and school board. They are members of long-standing community organizations that hold annual suppers. In the summer, at the edge of the quiet dirt road that cuts through their farm, they stock a small shed with homegrown corn, cucumbers, and tomatoes. It operates with a price sheet, a metal money box, and the honor system. Arriving in their kitchen on weekdays at 7:30, I got to know these folks fairly well. By that time, Russell would be in his slippers, eating breakfast and reading the paper, having been up since 4:30. Ryan, tall, skinny, and laconic, would be in the dining room shoveling cereal into his mouth and watching Good Morning America. And Mary would be rinsing the fresh chicken eggs at the sink and putting them in reused cartons to sell. These people struck me, a child of suburban New Jersey, as rugged, rural America incarnate, the best of our national DNA. Carrying the bitter taste of the radio stories through the squeaky screen door and into the diurnal rhythms of a struggling dairy family proved a potent tonic. Its effect was to make me think big thoughts. I wondered how it could be that such honest, hardworking people could produce a nutritious food almost everyone consumes and do it well, yet lose money. It seemed wrong that in this greatest of meritocracies, the faithful could deposit their capital, sweat equity, and skill into the market and emerge on the other side with a debit instead of a credit. Surely, I reasoned, there must be a logical explanation. The newspaper reports did their job up to a point. They assembled the relevant statistics, plugged in the voices of the analysts and the aggrieved, and hit the refresh button every couple of days. They told of a melamine scare in China that deflated global demand, the rise of ethanol that made food compete against fuel, and a milk machine that knew just one setting, more. They counted the thousands of farms that had disappeared in places as diverse as California, Vermont, and Wisconsin. There were heart-wrenching human interest stories about farmers who killed themselves because of the financial stress, of farm equipment auctions on sixth-generation farms, of communities left wondering what they really stood for anymore. Without intending it, these dispatches were forming pieces of a mosaic that depicted a country and a culture undergoing revolutionary change. What was lacking in my view was a grand narrative that explored the larger questions few others seemed to be asking. I wanted to know how the dairy industry had arrived at its current location, a place where cows increasingly don't graze on pastures and farms increasingly resemble factories. I wanted to uncover the implications of that journey, from grass to concrete, from farm to factory, on how people, animals, and the environment. I wanted to know how we might navigate to a place more just, prosperous, and sustainable. This book is my attempt at some answers. Oh, thanks.
It's really great.
Thank you. So that's kind of where I was coming from. I grew up in New Jersey. I moved to Vermont in 2001 to go to Vermont Law School. And I practiced law for about 5 years in Woodstock. In the course of that career, I realized I did not like being a lawyer, and I started freelance writing on the side. And I wrote for 7 Days for quite a bit, and other magazines and newspapers in Vermont and nationally, and the dairy story really struck me as something like it was a chance for me to get to know my new home state better, to understand the people who live here, to understand the economy, and it was a story that was in my backyard, so it was kind of just waiting there for me to kind of investigate it, and I liked that. It seemed like it was kind of authentic for me to be looking at something that was kind of close to home and not needing to go very far away to report something. I did end up going to California to report the book and to other places too, but I think for Vermont, dairy farming is just essential. It's like one of the biggest industries in the state. It's got a long history of it, so that's kind of why I started looking into it. I probably have the same questions that a lot of you have about how does this whole thing work, right? So I'll read from the new preface of the paperback, and so this has a different story. So let me go back. The farmers that I talked about in the introduction I just read, they're still farming, and I think they managed to do it because they kind of keep it very simple. They don't milk very many cows. They have their son who runs the farm now, and he works the farm. He has a wife and a kid. The daycare provider is still doing daycare. They still make maple syrup. So they have all these non-dairy sources of income, and I think that's another theme that I discovered through my reporting, is that especially in Vermont with smaller farms, because the margins are not great, you can't just rely on dairy as your sole source of income. So you'll see like a lot of farms around here, they'll have beef that they sell, or they'll make split rail fencing. They'll do some logging. They'll plow driveways. It's rarely just like a dairy farm, unless it's really big, and then it's just a dairy farm. So anyway, here's another story, actually from just down the road. So the story I just read about in the introduction was Barnard, Route 12, maybe about 8 miles north of Woodstock. This one is just like a mile outside of town. 7 years or so ago, dairy farming stopped being fun for Robert Bassett. He had taken pleasure for 30 years in managing his herd, working outdoors, and being his own boss. He had chosen this life, dropping out of college, abandoning his plans to become an engineer, and returning to the 98 acres his grandfather and father had farmed since 1945. The Bassett farm was a landscape of flat pastures, hillside forest, red barns, and Jersey cows less than 2 miles from the Woodstock Village Green. He felt a deep connection to the land. For 3 decades, Bassett rode the steep ups and downs in milk prices and found ways to manage rising costs. He held on when the family's 240-year-old farmhouse burned to the ground. But a persistent oversupply of milk in the U.S. depressed prices paid to farmers so much for so long that most dairies like his hadn't seen a positive balance sheet in years. Bassett, 57, was growing weary of toiling for such little return. His 100-cow farm was too small to operate with the same efficiency as the emerging 1,000-cow dairies in Vermont, and he couldn't afford to expand. So in the fall of 2022, Bassett sold his herd. For the first time in more than 75 years, no Bassett is milking cows in Woodstock. In fact, few people are. Bassett's farm was the last remaining dairy in town, aside from the nonprofit Billings Farm and Museum. As he sat at his kitchen table one April morning and reflected on the state of the dairy industry in Vermont, he offered a simple thesis. "There's no money in it," he said. "You've got to get big or get out." Many have gotten out. The business that shaped Vermont's landscape for more than 150 years has been largely transformed into an industry that a 1950 hill farmer would not recognize. That year, Vermont was home to 11,000 dairy farms. Today, there are about 500. Because what farmers are paid for milk rarely covers what it costs to produce it, they search for economies of scale, to milk more and more cows and spread the expenses over the larger revenue. From 2012 to 2022, that resulted in a 44% decrease in the number of small Vermont farms, defined as those with fewer than 200 cows. Others, as Bassett noted, got big. Even as the number of dairy farms overall declined, those with 700 plus cows more than doubled to 35. On a national scale, the trend is similar. Fewer farms, bigger herds. From 2014 to 2022, the number of dairy farms in traditional dairy states, Michigan, Indiana, Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Vermont, New York, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, fell by 37%, and the number of dairy farms in modern dairy states, New Mexico, Arizona, Texas, Colorado, Idaho, California, and Washington, dropped by 26%. Meanwhile, herd sizes in traditional dairy states have nearly tripled in the past 20 years, while herd sizes in modern dairy states have more than doubled. So that kind of gives you a sense of the national trend of dairy farm size.
That was my first question.
Yeah.
That whole, you just answered it.
Okay, there you go.
Change in the market was-
Yeah.
So fewer farms, but the ones that remain get bigger, have gotten much bigger.
Got much bigger. Yeah, yeah. And it's just like an economic reality that you kind of have to do that to make the numbers work, I think, you know. So, you know, there are more of these large farms in Vermont now, and one of them is right nearby. It's called Blue Spruce Farm. Yeah, the Audettes. You probably, I don't know if you've heard of them, but
If you live here, you have heard of them.
yeah. They're probably the most famous farm locally, right?
Them and Four Hills. Well, you know better than.
Yeah.
Those would
Yeah.
be the two biggest.
Yeah.
Four Hills.
How big are those herds?
I think Four Hills just keeps adding barns, so I wouldn't even wager a guess on what their herd is now. 2,000.
Yeah, I know the Blue Spruce is, I think, 1,500.
That'll stop being shortly, guys.
Yeah, so I can read a bit about Blue Spruce here to kind of give you an idea of what one of these big farms looks like in Vermont. And you can just drive past it anytime you want. It's you can see it because there's a giant wind turbine right behind the farm. I forget what is it on right on Route 22?
22A.
22A, yeah, in Bridport.
They're my neighbors.
They're your neighbors. Okay, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So anyway, I'll read about that, and you can give you like a little bit of a picture. For a glimpse into a dairy farm in a traditional state that has evolved with the times, you can't do much better than Blue Spruce Farm in Bridport, Vermont. Founded in 1958 by Norman and Mary Rose Audette with fewer than 80 cows, the farm has grown into one of the state's largest dairies. The family has grown too. 10 of the farm's 30 workers are descendants of Norman and Mary Rose. Blue Spruce Farm doesn't look much like the iconic picture of a Vermont dairy farm. Its 121-foot tall wind turbine is visible from Route 22A, rising above 3 green metal barns, which are roughly 512 by 108 feet. The Holstein and Ayrshire cows spend most of their time inside the freestall barns eating a ration of hay mixed with grain. Fans circulate air, and the walls are open. In cold weather, they can be closed. Bigger doesn't necessarily mean dirtier, and Blue Spruce has embraced innovation. Its wind turbine, installed in 2013, produces 176,000 kilowatt hours of renewable electricity per year. The farm's manure generates more energy. In 2005, Blue Spruce was the first dairy farm to sign on to Green Mountain Power's Cow Power program, which pays dairy farms to produce electricity. Waste is collected in a 16-foot deep anaerobic biodigester dug into the ground like a swimming pool. Methane from the manure fuels a generator, which in turn feeds enough electricity onto the grid to power more than 300 homes. In addition to capturing methane, a potent greenhouse gas, the biodigester cooks the undigested plant matter from the manure and turns it into soft bedding for the cows. The biodigester also separates 70% or more of the phosphorus from the liquid manure, and it is injected into the farm's fields, an improvement over simply spreading manure, which leads to runoff. In the spring, blue spruce's planters push seeds into the ground without disturbing the soil structure. As a large farm organization, we can't have nutrient runoff, said Marie Audette, who grew up on a dairy farm in Middlebury, Vermont, and married Norman and Mary Rose's son, Eugene. We've taken that to another level by improving the quality of our soils by cover cropping and no-till planting. The Audettes are members of the Agrimark Co-op, which produces the Cabot Creamery brand of dairy products. Cognizant of the perennial oversupply of milk, Agrimark discourages its farmers from increasing their milk production by paying them much less for any milk they generate over a predetermined quota. In effect, the Audettes have stopped growing their herd. To remain viable in the face of growing grain costs, the Audettes aim to cultivate their own grain. They are investing $2 million in machinery to harvest and dry the soybeans and corn they raise. This is a new skill set for us, and we're learning, said Marie, who was inducted into the Vermont Agricultural Hall of Fame in 2019 as a notable agricultural innovator. But we're confident it will save us money and pay for itself rather quickly. To be sustainable, Vermont's dairy farms will likely need to be as forward-thinking as Blue Spruce Farm. So that gives you a sense of kind of how Blue Spruce has evolved with the times and how they've changed their processes to be more environmentally sustainable, to be more economically sustainable. I think if you ask anyone around Vermont, they would probably point to this farm as like one of like the sort of the best examples of like a modern dairy farm in the state. So there's probably others too that might have a problem with it. I don't know, but.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
What did he say about nutrient runoff? What was his point about nutrient runoff?
So the dairy farms around here are allowed to spread manure after the winter thaw. After the spring thaw, and if that manure runs off the fields into the waterways, it causes right. So that's the problem.
How do they deal with it?
So they deal with it by instead of spreading it in a sprayer, they inject it into the ground so that it kind of goes right into the substrate and doesn't just kind of run off the top. Yeah.
That's some very high-tech farming.
Yeah, that's nothing.
That's the reason you grow sheep.
I'm curious about how the necessary changes in dairy farming have driven the educational system for agriculture in the state and how that system feeds itself, because UVM has always had a pretty good dairy program, but with the drastic changes in how the dairy industry works, that has had to change with how they're educating people and the need for education.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think of somebody like Nathan Audette on the Audette farm, a young farmer who, 4 years in college is a very different requirement for a dairy farmer than it was in 1958.
Yeah.
You could farm without a college education.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know much about how education has evolved, for the current times for agriculture.
Just one more required investment.
Yeah. I mean, maybe you don't have to even go to college if you come from a farm family. You just learn everything on the farm. I don't know.
It sounded like even if it's on a much larger scale, they're doing the same diversification of their revenues that the first family was.
Yeah.
Like they're crops. They're
Right.
presumably getting some sort of credit from Green Mountain Power for the production of electricity.
Yeah.
Which is essentially a revenue stream.
Right. Yeah.
Or else they'd be paying the power bill.
Right.
So even is that a pattern you see where even the big guys, so to speak, are not relying on the dairy to run the farm as a revenue?
I mean, I think everyone's just kind of doing whatever they can,
Yeah.
to kind of keep their balance sheets in the black.
Yeah.
Like whether, I know that there are a lot of huge farms that make a lot of maple syrup, in Vermont. And so that can be like a big revenue source. They can grow beef cattle, and like beef cattle are, I think, a very, very lucrative business these days.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think the farms of all sizes are diversifying, especially in Vermont. I think I don't know if that's the same in like New Mexico, for example.
Is the milk part of that dairy operation making any money? Is it possible to make money just producing milk? And also, to what extent are federal subsidies for dairy farmers essential to staying in operation? Or what percentage of... I just wonder if any of these guys are making money, or the ones I see on my road buying more and more equipment, massively expensive machinery that probably cost out, I don't know. I read about farm debt.
Yeah.
I just wonder, if you just produce milk, can you make a living doing that in Vermont?
I think you can. Yeah. I think there's good times and there's bad times. Like the milk. Sometimes the milk prices are very good, and it allows you to save money and to kind of build up a reserve. Sometimes milk prices are very low, and there is milk margin price insurance that kind of takes up some of the slack if the prices get too low. But those tough times can last a long time also, and that's often when farms end up closing down because they just can't sustain it anymore. They can't keep running the farm and kind of having making less money every month than they spend.
Are there substantial government subsidies for dairy farmers?
There's not like a direct payment subsidy, but the government buys buys milk and cheese, and that helps kind of subsidize it. There's all kinds of federal regulations of milk prices and the milk market, and I think if you want to learn more about that, you can look in my book. I explain a lot of those, but I think it'd be better to kind of read about it than to.
I'm wondering if you got into like how the federal milk price system is, because it's like no one can explain it. At least within the dairy industry, we all like take a guess.
Yeah. I could read a section of that if you want, but like it's a very complicated formula for how they come up with milk pricing, and
Who's they?
USDA.
And they're setting the prices for what? I don't know what any of it. So I'm just asking.
Yeah.
Is the USDA, do they set prices for what you can sell your milk at? Is that the idea?
They set prices for what the co-ops have to buy the milk from the farmers. Yeah.
So co-op Cabot pays the farmers in part based on a minimum number set federally.
Yeah.
Is that just okay?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
I'd say most farms sell to a co-op.
Okay.
So we're talking like that's just pretty standard. I as a sheep farmer can really easily sell you my product.
Right.
Most dairy farmers sell to a co-op.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I might be jumping to the end, but I'm a little curious. The liberal person who listens to Vermont Public incessantly and all of that, the easy thing to say with not knowing anything is, well, they're just forcing everything to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And do you see that at some point that's going to implode on itself and we're just going to come full circle and go back? Or do you think that we're going to end up like with 3 dairy farms in the world feeding everybody?
No, I think that farms are going to mostly reach this sort of equilibrium of size where it's big enough that they can have the economies of scale to keep it economically viable, but not so big that it's going to to be like I don't know, just like a factory farm everywhere, just because they have to kind of fit in with their surroundings, you know, and you know, especially in a state like Vermont, they're like it's very hilly. You're not going to have like 10,000 cow farms. You know, Vermont, the Vermont farmers provide about half of Vermont's milk, serve about half of Vermont's milk demand. So we bring in a lot of milk from other states.
Do we export milk to other states? Is that a balance thing, or is it just like directly they can only produce half of what the need is for the?
Yeah, I mean, the milk that's made in Vermont sometimes goes out of Vermont. Sometimes it stays in Vermont. You know, it goes to the co-op processors, and then they will ship it where it needs to go. Some of it goes to New York. Some of it goes to Massachusetts. You know.
And then we get milk back from New York.
And we get milk back from yeah. So
I do intend to read your book, but I would still like to leave tonight with maybe something in a nutshell.
yeah.
If the federal government wasn't involved in the milk industry, what would happen? Do you have any sense of that? Would they just oversupply so much that the market would fall through the bottom?
That's a good question.
I don't trust USDA. I just wonder.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out how essential their role is.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I can give you an example, maybe like from Quebec. You know, like in Quebec, they have even more government regulation there. They have a price. They have a supply quota in Quebec. So the farmers are mandated to produce a certain amount and no more. You know, and they do that to keep the price up.
Right.
You know, and if you go to Quebec and you drive around and you see the dairy farms there, you'll notice that they are like in tip-top shape. Like they have they're all newly painted, brand new equipment. The machinery is in really good condition, and that's a result of the supply control there. So, I guess that's the one extreme, right? Of like even more government control, right? So if you had even less government control, what would happen? I mean, I think you would probably have like fewer farms. You know, you'd have like the bigger farm, like the bigger and bigger farms probably being at an even more of an advantage. You know, because they can just achieve those economies of scale. You know, to a greater degree, and I think you might have less local milk. You know, you might see dairy farms congregating in places where it's cheaper to operate. Like instead of in the hills of Vermont, maybe there'd be more like in the Midwest, and then the milk would be trucked around more. So because the federal milk marketing order, the price of milk has different regions, and the price of milk varies by region depending on supply and demand in that region. So often in the Northeast there's more milk than necessary, so the price is kind of lower. In the Southeast there's not enough farmers, so the price there is higher. So what you see is kind of the federal government trying to incentivize farms to kind of balance out the supply of milk nationally. So if the government were not there, I think you would see kind of more milk being produced in areas where it's the cheapest to produce.
Is that why dairy farming became a thing in places like Florida, where it's just very inefficient for a cow to make milk?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
New
Because I
Mexico.
remember being shocked that there were even dairy farms in Florida and New Mexico.
Yeah.
I mean, you know about animal production,
Mhm.
milk production. It's not, a cow's not happy when it's that hot.
It's pretty hard.
Yeah, cows don't
Okay,
like
so
to eat,
that's
yeah.
that's part of the regional marketing order.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Huh.
I was wondering if you investigated like the farmers' opinions of the co-ops or how the co-ops work. Because we're talking about the federal milk pricing.
Yeah.
And I think of, from the farmer's perspective, we think of co-ops as almost evil. They do whatever they can to drive the small guys out.
Yeah.
So it's interesting what you just said about how if you thought like the federal pricing went away, how that would change the market. That that makes a lot of sense to me because I think about how we think of the co-ops as farmers, and if the feds took their regulations away, what the co-ops would do to farmers.
Huh. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
anyways, I was wondering if you dove into the co-ops at all.
Yeah, I did. And at the time I was writing the book, there were some scandals going on among some different co-ops around the country. You know, like just like malfeasance among the co-op directors and things like that. And you know, like Dairy Farmers of America kind of partnering with other processors to kind of like have monopolies and things like that. So yeah, there's a whole chapter on the co-ops in here. I think in Vermont, I think a lot of the farmers are, at least the ones that are members of like Agrimark. I think they're pretty. I think they're kind of boosters of the co-op, because the co-op, it's kind of like it's kind of symbiotic, you know, for the farmers in Vermont. The co-op does the marketing, right, and they do the trucking and they do outreach and things like that. And I think the farmers feel like without the co-op, they wouldn't have a place to sell their milk and they wouldn't be able to get it to market. I'm sure that there are farmers that feel like the co-op is taking too much of, you know, a percentage of their milk check. But I think the co-ops existed they came about for a reason, right? Because there's more strength when farmers band together.
But did they get co-opted?
Some did, yeah.
What? Oh, excuse me, I'm sorry.
On the far end of the market discussion, did you take a look at the trends in people drinking milk?
Yeah,
And how that, and I don't know if there are any trends, but to the extent there are, is that playing a role in this evolving world?
Yeah, you know, like for a long time, fluid milk consumption was going down per capita in the United States from about 1972 to like basically 2023. And then last year was the first year when milk consumption actually increased year over year. Yeah.
So all the other milk was going towards like production purposes. It was going to have to be a part of something as opposed to the glass of milk. I'm speaking.
Yeah, well, I mean, there's different.
When you say fluid consumption, is that just the glass of milk?
Glass of milk, yeah, yeah, but also dairy consumption in general has gone up too, and I think a big reason behind that is that people discovered that protein is really good for you, right? And so dairy has a lot of protein in it, so people are eating more protein these days, so therefore they're eating more dairy products like Greek yogurt and cottage cheese and things like that. Yeah, actually in the new preface here, I mentioned some of those statistics. So let's see if I can. Let's see. Yeah, so in 2024, U.S. consumption of whole milk increased by 3.2%. And dairy milk sales in general went up by 1.9%, reversing a downward trend that was in place since the 1970s.
Would that include ice cream?
Yeah, it includes ice cream. Yeah, because whole milk, I think, goes into ice cream. So let's see. I can read another little section about milk marketing, how that has changed a little bit. So let's see here. I'll read this section about why more people are drinking and eating whole milk products. I think it's kind of interesting. There are a few reasons why milk fat and protein are so important these days. Important for us and important for dairy farmers too. First, about 80% of milk is manufactured into dairy products like cheese, butter, and yogurt. So if a herd can pump out more milk solids without increasing the total liquid volume of milk, it's a more efficient and cost-effective operation. Second, farmers now get paid in large part for the solid composition of their milk, so more solids equals more revenue per cow. Third, if each cow is more productive, we can feed more people with fewer cows, thus reducing the greenhouse gas emissions from cattle. And finally, consumers want more fat and protein. In 2014, Time magazine had a cover story called Eat Butter, which explained that the 40-year public health campaign against fat was misguided, and that certain types of fat are beneficial for cardiovascular health. Now, U.S. per capita dairy consumption is at 661 pounds, a level not seen since the 1950s, driven by huge increases in cheese, butter, cottage cheese, and yogurt consumption. The promotion and innovation efforts of the dairy industry have followed suit. For example, Gone is the Got Milk campaign, which was launched in 1993 with a TV ad called Aaron Burr. I don't know if you guys remember that, seeing that, where about a history buff who couldn't enunciate the answer to a trivia question because he had just eaten peanut butter and didn't have a glass of milk to wash it down. It was the first of many Got Milk advertisements, which most often featured celebrities with milk mustaches. 2 years later, the Milk Processor Education Program, the national promotion arm of milk processors like Dean Foods and H.P. Hood, licensed Got Milk and distributed it nationwide. By the mid-90s, 91% of adults surveyed in the U.S. were familiar with the campaign. But by 2014, the same year as the Time article on the benefits of animal fat, the campaign was dead because it didn't get people to actually buy more milk. The daily consumption of fluid milk, as opposed to milk-based products like cheese, yogurt, and butter, had steadily declined from 0.96 cups per person in 1970 to 0.59 cups in 2014. There were lots of reasons for this. People had more drink options than ever before: sodas, juices, waters, non-dairy milks, and energy drinks. Milk prices had risen. Sales of cold cereal, which people often eat with milk, had fallen as people turned to quicker options like breakfast bars and Greek yogurt. The industry thus shifted to promoting the health benefits of dairy products through a partnership with the Mayo Clinic and creating new dairy products such as yogurt drinks, high-protein recovery shakes, and milk-based drinks infused with ingredients to boost energy and calmness. They've also abandoned traditional advertising campaigns and rely much more on social media influencers, such as Peggy Zoo's Milk Talk and TikTok, to push dairy products into the vast consciousness of consumers. So, and that's working. As I just read before that, the whole milk consumption has increased. So, those sort of newer, campaigns are, I guess, making a dent in the problem. So, yeah.
I read
Do you have
somewhere
a sheep
that.
talk?
Yeah. Do you have sheep talk?
I read somewhere that the consumption figures are affected by cheese consumption.
Yeah.
Vastly increased cheese consumption at places like Taco Bell.
Yes. Yes, and also like Pizza Hut. Yeah, yeah. And then actually in the book there's a story about how the USDA partnered with Pizza Hut to put more cheese in their pizza, to sell more cheese.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I go back? You spoke something about a certain amount of not direct government purchasing of cheese as a subsidy, but indirect government activities to encourage the purchasing. Is that an example of what you're talking about?
Yeah. Yep.
Sort of like, not manipulation, I know that's the leading word, but like some sort of getting into the market to try to encourage somebody to buy more than
Yeah.
otherwise would.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Yeah, and I think that's the USDA also does that through the school lunch program, school breakfast and lunch program. They pretty much require schools to offer milk. And currently the rule is they have to offer like skim and 1% milk, but there's a campaign afoot now to offer whole milk and 2% milk because it's actually healthier for the kids. Because the vitamin D and calcium in milk are fat soluble, and your body can absorb them much better through the fat in the milk than just through skim milk. Yeah.
So you referred in that passage to milk solids.
Yeah.
And the higher level of milk solids in a gallon, whatever measurement quantity they use to
Yeah.
measure it. It's the fat content or the
Fat and protein.
fat and protein content?
Yeah.
Huh. I didn't even know that there was that.
Yeah.
You could influence the solids output in a cow.
Yeah, you can. It's actually amazing. That's one of the things that I learned recently when I was looking into this is that universities have been doing a ton of research on how to make cows produce more of these fat solids, these milk solids, and I can read you or kind of mention this section. So. Another overarching fact in today's dairy industry is the result of a technology that has proven immensely successful in the 13 years since Milk Money was first published. I'm talking here about the development of genomic selection. Scientists now know how certain genes interact with the cow's gut and its nutrition, so they can create digital twins of cows and model how certain cows will respond to different nutritional formulas. This technology allows farmers to quickly identify the most valuable cows and target them for breeding. This means a farmer can build a herd that is not only robust and productive, but also able to produce milk with a high percentage of milk fat and protein. Some genetically and nutritionally optimized cows are now producing more than 240 pounds of milk per day, including 18 pounds of fat and protein. Think about that for a moment. A single cow every day making milk with an equivalent weight of an average NFL linebacker.
The cows are optimizing too.
Yeah. So isn't that incredible?
Did you look at the overall treatment and treatment of and health of the cows?
Yeah, I have a section, a chapter in the book on animal welfare.
What's your general thought about that?
My general thought, and especially in Vermont, is that farmers treat their animals very well, but at some quote unquote factory farms, those bigger farms where there's maybe 10,000 cows and the operation is huge, cows are not treated as well. They don't get the attention that they need. They're not in an environment that they should be in. They don't have any access to grass or the outside. They're basically just on concrete, in manure all the time. So, it varies, I guess. But I think that's one reason why, if you care about animal welfare, that's a good reason to kind of know where your milk comes from and support those local farms where you kind of see how those farmers treat their animals. But
Monument Farms,
What about? I don't know so much about them.
Monument Farms?
Yeah. Oh, I know about them. I mean, I know the name, but
only ever
are they
bought-
known for treatment of?
Well, I think they're very local, so. and
Yeah.
small, so.
I was surprised when you were talking about big farms that you didn't mention Monument Farms. I just thought they were the big.
Oh, that's a big one too. Yeah.
Yeah.
They have their own processing plant,
They have their own
right?
Yeah,
dairy
it's right in
processing.
Yeah.
Cambridge, and you can go and get raw milk from them too, like from
Right.
a calf or something. I haven't done it since my kid was little.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
surprised if you don't have a chapter on their chocolate milk. 'Cause that's- here.
They have good chocolate milk. Yeah.
How about the migrant worker piece? Do you look at that in your book?
Yeah, there's a chapter on that too.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jenny, it's gonna have all your answers. You're
Oh,
gonna
good.
do all
No,
all night.
it's all right. I'll buy it.
But yeah, no, that's a huge part of it. In Vermont, I think they estimate there's about 1,000 migrant workers on dairy farms right now
In the whole state?
in the whole state.
Because I just recently heard a number not much lower than that, just in Addison County. Oh, wait, on farm workers, not just dairy farm. Never mind.
Yeah, just migrant workers on dairy farms. Yeah, that's my impression anyway. I think that it's hard to get an accurate number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And ICE is advertising for agents in
Yeah.
Madison County right
Right.
Yeah.
now. Terrifying thought.
Very.
But yeah, there's an organization in Burlington called Migrant Justice.
Yeah.
Yep.
You heard of them, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're doing great work.
remember.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So they're doing great work, and they have like a cool campaign. They're trying to get Hannafords, I think, to
Milk with dignity.
Milk with Dignity. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So there was a brief reference to the books being published in paperback and then to when it's original publication.
Yeah.
What year was it published in hardcover?
2012.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you wrote this in 2011, 2010, 2011,
Yeah.
and then you've recently written a new preface
Yeah.
and republished in paperback.
Yeah.
And Senator Sanders has written the introduction, is that correct?
The intro is from the original
Oh, okay.
hardcover.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big gap between hardcover publication and paperback.
Yeah, I guess so.
Am I putting you on the spot?
No, I mean it wasn't my idea. The publisher, Brandeis University Press, they didn't want to go out of print, I guess, and they didn't want to make more hardcovers. So
Yeah. Well, it's a subject that's never going to be irrelevant, right? I mean, it's. But just from a publishing perspective and a bookselling perspective, it's interesting to see a book be published that many years, republished
yeah,
in paperback.
yeah.
So I might, and other people might not be as curious as I am about the birth of a book and the publication process. But did you write it's a very specific niche subject. Did you write a proposal and get an agent, and then the agent sold it to Brandeis,
Yeah.
or did you write the book and?
I wrote a proposal and I
Okay.
had an agent, and the agent found. Actually, it was first published by Upney University
Okay.
Press in New England,
Yeah.
which is not around
Which doesn't
anymore.
exist anymore.
And Brandeis bought their backlist,
Yeah.
or a lot of their backlist.
And so Brandeis is responsible for the reissue.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Well,
And
congratulations on having the book reissued. That's pretty good news for an author.
thanks. Yeah, it actually. I mean, like I've been raising 3 kids in the interim, so I've been really busy, and I have a regular job. So, but it's kind of motivated me to start a new book. So,
Oh, good. And
Yeah.
Can you tell us what the new book is about?
it's about our evolving relationship with forests.
Okay.
Ooh, that's a good one.
so-
Come back for that, please.
Yeah. So I love the forest, and I think it's super interesting.
Have you
So
read Ethan Tepper's book, How to Love a Forest?
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. I think he's great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
There's so many interesting books about Vermont's various, agricultural industries and farms and what people's. Have you read the Helen Wybrow book, Salt Stones, about being a shepherd? And you should read that.
I read Ethan Tapper's. That was
Okay.
really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just we love those books at Vermont Bookshop. We're-
Well, good. Well, I hope it comes and becomes a reality.
Yeah.
I'm at the proposal stage right now, so
Okay.
we'll see. But my idea is to kind of report from around the country as to like what's happening right now in forests,
Yeah.
and what that says about our needs and our values. Because I think forests are super important, and people kind of, I think, overlook that. And we're surrounded by forests in Vermont,
and
right?
There's so much variety in our forests.
There's so much variety, yeah, and we're using them in different ways now than we ever had before. Now they're carbon sinks. They're investments that like huge hedge funds are buying up forest land and holding it and selling carbon credits based on that. So it's a topic that is not very important to Vermont, obviously, but all around the country there's important forest issues. The Pacific Northwest, the Southeast, mill closures, conservation, wilderness. So yeah, I think my intent is to have as much fun as possible in writing the book, and hopefully the fun that I have will kind of come through the book.
Well, writers like you are a gift to intellectually curious people who read. So, thank you.
Oh, that's nice of you. Thank you. Yeah, we'll see. Yeah.
We have time for?
Yeah.
So, it seems to, I'm new here, so I don't know that much, but it seems to me, from what I've read, that, I think I've read that 100% of Vermont's waterways are polluted now at a many of them unhealthy level, pouring into Lake Champlain, which is heavily polluted, and Derry, overwhelmingly contributes to this, to the extent that the EPA, at least back when we had an EPA a couple years ago, they were in the process of taking over the regulation of the waterways. Maybe there's a chapter in your book about this too, from the state regulators.
Yeah.
And this is, seems to me, a pretty massive environmental problem for Vermont.
Yeah.
One which I would expect a major environmentalist like Bernie Sanders to take a position on. And I haven't heard that. You just mentioned that he did a foreword to your book?
He wrote the foreword to the book, yeah.
You know, I don't know how that phrase is on TV. That's probably not good, but it seems to me there needs to be strong political leadership on the environmental issues related to dairy
Yeah.
for the future of the state.
Yeah, no, for sure. Yeah, and it's a complicated issue. You know, it's the state of the lakes in Vermont now, especially Lake Champlain. It's been a long time coming. There's been a lot, like many years of nutrient runoff have contributed to that algae bloom problem and to that pollution problem, and it's not going to be reversed in like a year or 5 years. It's going to be a really slow process to kind of to bury that layer of phosphorus and nutrients that's in the lakes right now. So I guess one point is like the state is working on it. I'm not sure if they're working on it as strong as they could be. It's going to take a long time for those waterways to clear up. The state is also, trying to balance, I think, some of the interests here, like the economy, dairy farms with the environment. I mean, if you're too hard on the dairy farmers and you make the regulations too strict and onerous, it becomes too expensive for the farmers to make those improvements, and then they can't operate. So, I think you got to kind of walk a fine line. But I agree with you. It's a huge problem, and it needs more political clout, I think, behind it to achieve a quicker solution. But I know if you ask any dairy farmer, I think they would probably say it's already incredibly difficult to be a dairy farmer in Vermont, and if you're going to put more regulations on us, it's going to be even harder, and you're going to lose even more farms. So I think that's kind of the dynamic, unfortunately. But yeah, it's kind of embarrassing, right? That, like, yeah. But I interviewed the person at the Department of Agriculture who's in charge of water quality, and they're well aware of the situation, and I think they've got new regulations in place that are trying to reduce the runoff to streams and lakes and stuff, but it's going to take a while.
And Marie Audette was a legislator for a brief period too, was she not? Maybe after the publication of the book, but I think she was a, do you know this?
Mm-hmm.
She was a state representative for at least two terms.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I don't.
Who is she?
Marie Audette.
She's one of the farmers that I talked to. Yeah. I talked to her like in 2024, I guess. And I actually just called her the other day to see how things were going, and just to kind of get an update from her. And I don't know if you're interested, but I could just give you a few notes of what she told me. They're doing continuous improvements, learning and adaptation. It's never not been challenging. The cost of doing business is always increasing. They're always paying their workers more, but milk prices are not always following along. My message to you is, quote, "Our farm, the farmers we know, we're all plodding along. We're making our decisions. We're working on next year, making our plans. We have another generation here that's already working, and little kids growing up on the farm." So I think they're doing okay, but they're not doing great.
Like the same answer I gave you about the bookstore business.
Yeah.
I think it's the state of the economy.
Yeah. So
Thank you so much
Thank you for
coming
coming.
all the way here to talk to a small group of us.
I'm sorry
I
that you
lo-
didn't
I
have
actually-
more, but I really liked this format a lot.
No, I loved it. It's
Thank
great.
you.
Yeah, no, I don't mind at all. No, it was really fun. Thanks for coming out. I appreciate it. Hopefully that was what you expected.